Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, gaming interests go on the record. Also, the V team takes a look at vaccination numbers. They're improving. And the Mo Brooks crazy train has momentum. It goes splash. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and today I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, and Josh Moon, columnist and investigative reporter for APR. And you also have a podcast now. Plug the podcast.
Oh yeah, I do. I do indeed have a podcast. It's going pretty well. It's going pretty well.
What's the name of it?
Oh, Alabama Politics This Week. I'm sorry. I'm not good at the shameless self-promotion. I'm sorry.
Well, as my mother used to say, if you don't toot your own horn, your horn probably won't get tooted very often. So there you go. The numbers of vaccines that are getting in people's arms, Susan, in the state are improving dramatically. And also, the problem, though, is that we still don't have enough. Now, the Biden administration has promised they are sending more vaccines, but right now we hear people complaining, and it's just because we don't have enough vaccine.
We just don't have enough. I mean, the initial buy was grossly underdone. It was 100 million vaccines, and now that they bought another 300,000? I mean, million?
200 million.
200 million, and as they begin to roll those out, maybe these numbers will start to pick up again.
I mean, it's looking better every day. I mean, the case numbers are down. It's fluctuating. But still, we've got a long way to go to get these shots in arms. Josh, what are you hearing?
Yeah, we speaking of the podcast, we interviewed Dr. Michael Sagg a few weeks back about this, and he was really complimentary of the Trump administration on the initial plan and planning, how to manufacture this vaccine and the investments they made there. He was really critical of the Trump administration on the plan to roll these things out and actually get them into people's arms, because they just kind of left it up to states to do it however they could, and in a state like Alabama where our government is not necessarily running like a top. We don't plan very well for things like this, and I think you see that right now as we're lagging well behind the rest of the country in getting these shots out. And I think we are getting better. I just think that it took some time to put all this stuff together because it requires a lot of actual work and planning, and we don't typically have people in our government who do those things.
Well, and also the government had been gutted to the point that those types of services were not even available. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is a one-shot vaccine, that's scheduled to come online. That's going to help out. And I think there's some basic misconceptions. We need to get a immunologist on here or someone to talk about this, because the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is proven to be 67% effective, Susan.
Right.
I mean, we don't get that in flu vaccines.
No, we don't get that. That's the misunderstanding that people get from this, is that while, Pfizer and Moderna are like 92 and 95, Johnson & Johnson only 67. However, that's much higher rate than the flu vaccine itself.
Yeah.
I mean, these are great efficacy numbers.
Yeah, they really are. The other thing we learned this week, that UAB is vaccinating more blacks and underrepresented population than the state as a whole and the nation as a whole. UAB is a shining example of what Alabama can do when you have the best and the brightest.
Yeah, they've been a standout around the country throughout this entire pandemic. I mean, really, they have been. You know, a lot of the trials went through there. Their doctors consulted on a lot of the stuff. I mean, really, they've been kind of a beacon of light in this state throughout this horrible experience we've all gone through.
Yeah.
And so it's not really a surprise that they would be tackling the toughest aspect of this pandemic, which is getting the vaccine to to poorer communities and to communities that are very, very skeptical given past history in this country. Right. And I think that's driving a lot of the feelings among the black community. Is you have things like the Tuskegee syphilis study several years ago that and they don't trust this. They don't trust things, and so it's very, very important for them to reach out and to try to make that connection there. And I think you're seeing that. And if anybody doubts the efficacy of these vaccinations, just look at the numbers, over the last few weeks. And there's nothing really changed except for the fact we're vaccinating more people.
Yeah, and one of the things that you brought up with the black community being more concerned, they're also more likely to get the disease. So that's a double-edged sword there. So it's so important to get these people vaccinated.
Well, and I'm going to switch subjects here off that very important subject to say this might have something else to do with that. A national study just came out that showed black Alabamians are 4 times more likely to be jailed on marijuana charges than their white counterparts. Josh?
Well, I mean, that's actually probably an improvement. To be honest, I mean, it was. I've seen other studies that say it's as high as 10 times more likely. And it's a combination of factors that police will often point out about this that lead to that. But one big portion of that, one big factor in there is racism. I mean, it's. I don't think anybody sets out to go out and say, hey, I'm going to go out and arrest a bunch of black kids tonight. But I do believe that's what ends up happening. And if that's what's ending up happening, I think a lot of police departments need to take a good hard look at what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Well, we need to take a good hard look at reevaluating marijuana laws all the way around.
Okay.
Sure.
I have never seen anyone beat their wife or their kids to death on marijuana, but I sure have seen them do it on alcohol. Another troubling statistic from another national study, Alabama ranks at 4th highest percentage in inmate serving harsh sentences. We are a lock them up and throw away the key state. This study shows that, and it's not helping us in our quest to fulfill our responsibility to the Constitution or the Justice Department that is suing us.
Yes, absolutely. The Justice Department is suing us over our Medicaid, over our treatment of prisoners. The overcrowding. We've got to do something. There's got to be more sentencing reform.
Yeah, it's a big problem, and I think you heard President Biden say this week that he thinks that drug offenders should not go to jail, that they should go to rehab and to other services out there, and I think that you're getting a lot of agreement on that right now as we see the opioid epidemic stretch into the white community.
Yeah, well, one of the things we know is most really harmful drugs, people try them and they just can't stop on their own. They need help.
All right.
But we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
You'll never guess what 400,000 people in the U.S. were using when they crashed their cars last year. No, not this. This. Distracted driving will kill you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
the voice of Alabama politics. Josh, over the last 2 weeks on your podcast, you have been able to sit down with representatives of the Porch Creek Indians as well as Victory Land, and you have learned a lot about how this grand gaming package has come together and what likely might be its future. If you could tell us who you spoke with and what y'all talked about, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. We spoke to some executives from Wind Creek Gaming, the CEO Jay Doris and the VP of Development and Intergovernmental Relations, Arthur Mothershed. Also, longtime Victory Land and Birmingham Racecourse attorney David Johnston was on with us, and they just kind of talked about this thing and how it got started. And the folks from Wind Creek were very, very open about this. It wasn't working. They wanted to progress and come up with some sort of a deal where they could grow and the state could make some revenue off of gaming. They introduced this last year, which I told them and told everybody else that I was critical of, which was the $1 billion deal, because it gave a monopoly to the Porch Creeks. And while the state did make $1 billion and they would annually make some money, I felt like there was a better deal to be made. And really, this was kind of the deal that's come together in this bill. They sat down with the track owners, Louis Benefield and Nat Wynn and some other folks that are involved intimately with the tracks around the state, and they've worked out a deal, I believe, that's going to ultimately help a lot of hard-pressed communities in Macon and Greene and Jefferson and Mobile counties, and they've got a bill that can pass now, and it's going to expand the gaming options for the Porch Creek Indians as well. And so I think everybody is going to end up winning out of this. Everybody's going to make a lot of money, including the state of Alabama, which is going to pull in somewhere close to $1 billion annually off of this.
Susan, you and I have known Arthur Mothershed personally, very level-headed, good businessman, always been very kind and easy to deal with.
Yes.
And so are many of the folks down at the tribe. They're looking out for their own, and that should. Same thing with Louis Benefield and the families there and Nat Wynn. They're all trying to do what's best for their business.
You can't blame them for that.
But the thing is, and Josh, I think you reported this, that it will create like 1,000 new jobs at all these various locations. I mean, that's a lot of jobs.
Yeah, you're looking at a minimum of about 1,000 jobs at every spot here. I mean, so you're talking just off the top, somewhere around 6,000 jobs or so. Not counting the folks that are already at the current Porch Creek locations, which will also expand. They're also,
and these are good paying jobs.
And let's not forget that they're expanding into Birmingham and some of these other places that will also generate jobs there.
I mean, it's going to be a big jobs opportunity. The state won't have to pay a dime for those jobs, unlike other jobs we get.
Right.
And
No
the
incentive
state
packages
is
there.
going to make somewhere around $750 million annually, right, Josh? Is that?
Well, it's $750 just off of, that's the projections just off of the lottery and the casino portion of this thing. That doesn't take into account
The existing ones.
the existing stuff. Well, it doesn't take into account also
you're right.
what's gonna take place with the compact. There and how much money the state will make off the compact with the Porch Creek Indians as well, which will be negotiated on the backside of this deal. So it's a huge deal, and this really kind of started with Arthur Mothershed and Louis Benefield sitting down. I mean, you got two level-headed, easygoing guys that are rational and can kind of talk things out, and I think that's what kicked this thing off was that relationship between those two guys.
Yeah. Well, and we know that when people can sit down and discuss ideas and business in a non-hostile environment, that they can come up with something that's good for everybody. And I think these groups all want what's best for Alabama because they're businessmen, men and women. It's not good for them if it's bad for Alabama. That's just the way it is. That's something important that I want to bring up is that this still has to go to a vote of the people. If it passes the House, it has to go to a vote of the people. And one important thing we have to keep in mind, this will take gaming money out of politics. That's a huge win because you won't have the people that run the tracks and run the casinos and all that owning politicians.
So they won't
Right.
be able
Yeah.
to contribute to campaigns anymore.
Right.
It's over.
Yeah,
Right.
that's 100% true, and and David Johnston, who was on with us as well, said he believed this thing when it went to the vote of the people, just looking at the numbers, would pass by greater than 70%.
I think it will. Excuse me. Something happened last week. Fred Gray, Sr., the amazing civil rights attorney,
Pardon me.
great man who's done a lot for Alabama. Congresswoman Terry Sewell has written a letter to President Biden asking that he be awarded the congressional or the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Josh. I think that's the right move right there.
Oh yeah, it should have happened decades ago. I mean, Fred Gray is honestly, to me, possibly the greatest unknown civil rights figure that we have. Now, I know he's known around here, but you don't hear when people start talking about the great civil rights people. And this is not to take anything away from any of those folks, of course. But Fred Gray and what he did. From a legal standpoint, I mean, he was the attorney of record on so many things. All you need to know about Fred Gray is that in 1960, at the height of the civil rights movement, 5 years after the bus boycott and all the anger that surrounded it, that man got Martin Luther King Jr. acquitted on tax evasion charges by an all-white jury in Alabama. All right, give him the Medal of Freedom just for that.
That's pretty amazing. That is pretty amazing. I think Representative Sewell is doing the right thing, and I would hope that the Biden administration would see the wisdom in that. We don't have time to get to it, but there is a bill to eliminate straight ticket voting in Alabama.
Fat chance. Republican supermajority.
Well, if the Democrats had a supermajority, they wouldn't pass it.
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't.
I think it's the right thing to do. I think
do too.
That it causes people to think, right, Josh?
Yeah, you got to kick it out of there, and I would say the same if this was a Democratic supermajority. You got to get rid of it.
Yeah. It's bad to have straight ticket voting because it just allows people not to think about who they're voting for, and that's irresponsible. All right, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
So you got caught speeding. But this time you got more than a ticket.
What are you in for?
Vehicular homicide.
Stop speeding before speeding stops you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
Your career isn't a job, it's a journey. Your next job could lead to bigger things, and you're in charge of how fast and how far you want to go. At alabamaworks.com, you can connect with employers and start working right now. Then chart your path forward with training and career planning tools. That next paycheck is great, but it's only the beginning. Start a great success story at alabamaworks.com.
A lot can change in 5 years, except those smile lines you treated with Bellafill. Because that's about how long Bellafill will keep them smooth and filled. 5 years. Now you can always look your best without all those injections, appointments, and costs. Bellafill is the only dermal filler that stimulates and maintains collagen growth long term. Now time is on your side.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. As they say in Congress, I want to take a point of personal privilege, if y'all will let me.
Certainly.
Sure.
Last week, I was talking about Congressman Mo Brook referring to anti-Christian Democrats. Mm-hmm. And I compared that to his being a Mormon. And the reason is because the LDS, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has been one of the most persecuted churches in American history. I mean, their leader was killed. They had been run from state to state. And if you look at figures like Mitt Romney, Republican from Utah, one of the most honorable Republicans I know. I know some of our people here in Alabama wouldn't agree with that, but his public character is without reproach in my mind, and a great example of what that church represents. I was not making anything disparaging about the Mormon church. I don't care in America if you are Christian, Jewish, if you practice Islam. I don't care if you're a Buddhist or you're Zoroastrian. You have a right in America to worship according to the dictates of your heart. What we shouldn't do, and this was the point, is try to paint a broad brush of people being anti-Christian because of their party affiliation. And some of Mr. Brooks's folks have taken that out of context and said that I was trying to disparage him for his Mormon faith. Now, I have learned something, and I had to correct the record from last week. Mr. Brooks, according to a report from AL.com in 2017 and his Wikipedia page, was a devout follower of LDS, and but somewhere in the last 10 years or so, he has dropped out of the church. He says he's found doctrinal differences with the church, but he still attends the Mormon church with his wife, and so he said now he's a plain old Christian. But again, none of that, all of that was to say that Mr. Brooks should not use his rhetoric to disparage others, because in this country you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be a Muslim, you don't have to be anything. You can not care about religion at all. This is America, and I believe that Mr. Brooks uses it to try to drive a wedge and get attention for himself by using Christianity as a weapon against other people. So, as a point, a personal...
Not a very Christian thing to do.
Not even a plain old Christian, but there you go.
Yeah, not that and the bigotry and the hatefulness and everything else. I rarely saw Jesus say it was time to kick ass. So but that's just me. Maybe I missed those parts of the Bible. But it's this is Mo, and that's what he does, and so it would be natural that they would think that about, they would automatically go to the worst possible explanation for what you said is, that's because that's how they think, these are the worst possible humans. And so they think that everybody else is on their level, and they couldn't imagine a situation where you were just saying, hey man, don't persecute people like that and stop using your faith as a wedge. That's understandable.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we run into real problems when you start disparaging people over their religion. Mm-hmm. I mean, because that goes to the core of who a person is most of the time. Mm-hmm. What I like to do, especially in politics, is look at their public character. How do they comport themselves in public? I mean, and again, there's
a lot of... And how do they vote?
A lot of people think Mo Brooks is the greatest thing on earth. But if you look at his record for representing Alabama, it's 100 to 0. Yeah, I mean, it's 0 to 100.
It's abysmal. Yeah, he's passed one bill to rename a post office. He's been there for 10 years. He's done nothing. He's done nothing but embarrass you for 10 years, and he got a post office renamed that I could have done. I could have done that.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting to see how they immediately lie as soon as you tell the truth.
Well,
but
of course.
he has said that he is no longer a member of LDS, that he just attends the church.
Good for him.
So,
okay. I mean, honestly, I could care less.
But I wanted to correct the record. If I get it wrong, I want to make it right. The Mo Brooks train, though, Josh, we're hearing, has got momentum. And we hear that President Trump is willing to back him if he decides to run for Senate. And I hear out of D.C. that they're just thrilled.
I mean, honestly, God, I'd just like for everybody to go back about 5 or 6 years and think, and just try to imagine your thoughts. If somebody told you in the future anybody would care who Donald Trump backed. You know what I mean? It's so out of this world insane that we're listening to this crook that incited an insurrection that did everything he could for personal gain for the last 4 years, and here we are, and he's going to drive the train on who we elect in this state, and we're going to elect a moron. It's just,
I believe he's willing to even make an appearance. Maybe
Yeah,
he made
great.
an appearance on January 6th.
But
right?
again, and listen,
not for free though. He ain't coming for free.
Well, he backed Luther Strange, and then he backed Roy Moore, and they think that Brooks is a good candidate. Brooks will be a Roy Moore candidate when the opposition research gets through with him. He will absolutely be that candidate. I want to move on because somebody has officially thrown their hat in the ring. Ambassador Blanchard has announced candidacy for U.S. Senate. She's a Republican. Linda Blanchard. She's a very wealthy individual. She and her husband are very wealthy. They've contributed lots of money to the Republican Party. She was ambassador of Slovenia, which I bet you people couldn't pick out on a map.
No.
But she is running on the MAGA platform, and this is what she's hoping to do is to represent the MAGA side of Alabama in the U.S. Senate.
Well, listen, I got to say, I think she's really going to relate well to the working class people of Alabama. Her first real act as a candidate was to write herself a $5 million personal check. So, listen, who among us isn't funding our campaign in such a way? And so, good luck, MAGAs.
Yeah, but she understands the working people.
Of course she does.
Pain.
Of course she does. I will have to say, with some regret, Jimmy Evans, former Attorney General, passed away last week. He will be missed. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.